My ex-husband vanished with all my savings for his secret spiritual retreat, only for me to discover it was a luxury casino in Monaco. His best friend snorted, "You didn't know? He's been planning this for months." I gasped, "Planning what?" "To ruin me." A pause. "No. To disappear forever." My knees buckled, but my revenge was just getting started. My name's Dana. I'm 49 years old. I spent most of my adult life in Asheville, North Carolina. A town with just the right mix of southern charm and artsy oddness that kept things interesting without ever becoming overwhelming. I worked as a high school guidance counselor for 22 years. I was good at my job, knew which kids were acting out because of trouble at home, and which ones just needed someone to believe in them. And for most of those years, I thought I had something real at home too. My husband, Trevor, was the kind of man people naturally trusted. He had charisma, that warm eye contact and easy laughter that made strangers think they'd known him for years. He ran a mid-sized marketing agency and always had a fresh project, a new client, a new trip. He kept busy, and for the longest time, I took that as ambition. Looking back, it was distance. He had this way of talking about energy, the universe, balance, and healing. I used to think it was beautiful, that openness to spirituality in a man who also drove a BMW and wore designer shoes. I saw it as depth, complexity. It was distraction. And I was the perfect audience for it. About a year before everything fell apart, I noticed small changes. Trevor stopped coming home for dinner. Not always, just once or twice a week, then more. He said he was working late or had last-minute meetings with clients. At first, I didn't question it. I trusted him. We'd been married for 14 years. We had a joint savings account. We were talking about downsizing and taking a trip to Portugal. Why would I suspect anything? He started meditating every morning in the sunroom. He burned incense that made the whole house smell like cardamom and cedar. He'd sit cross-legged, eyes closed, palms up, humming under his breath. I'd peek in sometimes on my way to make coffee and see his face so still, so calm. I used to think he was centering himself. Turns out, he was just preparing his exit. The day he told me about the spiritual retreat, I was folding laundry. Just a mundane Tuesday evening. He stood in the doorway with that slightly performative stillness he used when he wanted me to take something seriously. "I've booked a retreat," he said. "In Switzerland." I looked up, surprised. Switzerland? It's a silent retreat. In the Alps. Total disconnection. No phones. Just nature and reflection. He looked tired when he said it, like he'd been carrying the world on his back. I remember feeling concerned for him. He'd always worked too hard. Always tried to be everything to everyone. Maybe he really did need time away. I asked questions. How long? Who else was going? How did he find it? He had vague answers, found it through a friend, just a couple of weeks, some kind of high-end mindfulness program. It seemed plausible. Expensive, sure, but we weren't struggling. Or so I thought. He left on a Thursday morning. Kissed me on the forehead like he always did. Told me he loved me. 3 days later, I tried to pay the electric bill. The account bounced. I blinked at the screen. Tried again. Then I logged into our joint savings account. There was less than $400 left. I stared at the numbers for a long time, not even fully comprehending them at first. Then came the slow crawl of horror. Transaction after transaction. Money wired to unknown accounts. 5 figures transferred in chunks over the past 2 weeks. Trevor's name on every transfer. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Still nothing. That's when the panic truly set in. I drove to his office the next morning. The woman at the front desk looked confused when I said I was his wife. Her eyes darted away. She handed me a manila envelope and said he'd asked her to give it to me if I came by. He had resigned 2 weeks earlier. Effective immediately. The letter in the envelope said he was stepping away to focus on personal growth and spiritual realignment. It was printed on thick, expensive paper. I remember standing in the parking lot, staring up at the clouds, unable to cry, unable to scream. Just stunned into silence. This wasn't some impulsive getaway. This had been planned. I went home and sat on the porch until the sun dipped behind the trees. I didn't move. The glass of wine in my hand stayed full. I didn't even know what I was waiting for. Then I called Darren. Darren was Trevor's best friend. Old college roommate. The kind of guy who wore flannel year-round and never smiled unless he meant it. He picked up on the second ring. "You didn't know?" he said, after I asked if he'd heard from Trevor. His voice was flat. Like this wasn't a surprise to him at all. "Didn't know what?" I asked, the phone pressed so hard to my ear it hurt. "He's been planning this for months." I couldn't breathe. "Planning what?" I whispered. A long pause. To disappear. Forever. I dropped the phone. That's when it stopped being heartbreak and turned into something else entirely. I became a woman with a mission. I spent the next few days in a fog. A thick, dreamlike haze where time moved strangely and nothing felt real. I wandered around the house like a ghost, touching door frames, running my fingers across Trevor's side of the bed, looking for some sign, anything, that would make sense of what was happening. There were no answers. Just silence. And the haunting absence of someone I thought I knew. I called the police. They were polite, sympathetic, and entirely unhelpful. It's not a crime for a man to take his own money, the officer said, even though we were married and it wasn't just his. I could hear a dog barking in the background during the call, and I remember thinking how normal it sounded. How unfair it was that someone somewhere was just walking their dog like it was any other Wednesday. I went through every file, every bank statement, every old email. I tried to find patterns. Anything he might have left behind. Trevor wasn't careless. He had spent time covering his tracks. There were no passwords, no forwarding addresses, no clues. Just a gaping void where our life had been. The worst part was the looks from people. Friends. Neighbors. Their eyes filled with pity, or worse, disbelief. As if somehow I should have known. As if I'd been willfully blind to the man I married. Maybe I had been. Maybe I wanted so badly to believe in what we had that I ignored every red flag. That realization hit like a punch to the stomach. I started sleeping on the couch. The bed felt too big, too empty. I stopped going to work. Told the school I needed time. They didn't press me, bless them for that. But inside I was unraveling, thread by thread. Then I remembered Tanya. We'd gone to college together. She lived in London now, worked in finance, always flying somewhere. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I sent her a message anyway. I didn't expect a response, but within hours, she called me. Dana, holy hell, she said. I don't even know what to say. She listened as I told her everything, every detail, every ugly truth. She was quiet for a long time after I finished, then said, "Do you remember Thierry? My friend who works with high net worth clients? He mentioned something strange the other day." Strange turned out to be Trevor. Monaco. The Casino de Monte Carlo. Seen 2 weeks ago. High roller tables. Private penthouse suite. Champagne. A woman with platinum hair clinging to his arm. I stared at my phone long after the call ended. So he hadn't disappeared into some silent retreat. He'd disappeared into decadence. That's when the grief shifted. Grief has stages, sure. But mine came in sharp, jagged spikes. Rage, heartbreak, denial, more rage. And beneath it all, a low, steady hum of disbelief. Trevor hadn't just left. He had reinvented himself without me, cashed out our life together, and used the proceeds to fund some grotesque fantasy version of himself. I knew what I had to do. I flew to Monaco. I cashed out what little was left of my IRA and booked a red-eye. I didn't care that it was reckless. I needed to see him. Needed to look him in the eye and understand. Needed to ask him why. The city was surreal, polished, glittering, indifferent. People there lived on another plane of existence, as if the rest of the world didn't apply to them. I stayed in a tiny apartment outside the center, cheap and drafty, but it gave me cover. I spent the first 2 days at cafes near the casino, nursing espresso, watching the entrance. Then I saw him. Trevor. Walking out of the casino like he owned the world. Slimmer than before. Tanned. Dressed in linen like some aging movie star. And happy. That was the part that hurt the most. He was smiling. I followed him. I didn't know what I would do, just that I had to stay close. He strolled down the street with the platinum-haired woman from Tanya's description clinging to his arm, her laugh high and breathless. They stopped at a jewelry boutique. She tried on a necklace. He paid for it without blinking. I wanted to scream, but I waited. I waited until that evening when I saw him again. Alone this time, on the balcony of the casino, drink in hand, gazing out over the ocean. The image of peace. Of freedom. Of a man who believed he had left everything behind. I walked straight up to him. He turned. And froze. Dana, he whispered, as if saying my name burned his throat. He looked terrified. Good. He should have been. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. My presence was enough. The questions burned in my eyes, and he saw them all. I watched his smug composure crumble. Watched him fumble for words that wouldn't come. Security came quickly. They didn't ask questions. Just saw a woman approaching a high roller and made assumptions. I left without resistance. I had gotten what I needed. Back home, I went to war. I hired a lawyer. A real one. The kind with a reputation and a team of assistants who answered emails before I finished typing them. I brought everything: bank statements, copies of transfers, screenshots of him in Monaco, Tanya's testimony. Then I found Eloise, a forensic accountant, late 30s, sharp as glass. Wore heels like armor and smiled like she already knew your secrets. She tore into Trevor's finances with a precision that was almost poetic. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, money laundered through fake wellness brands. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had built a life of smoke and mirrors. I felt sick, but also strangely empowered. I had spent months in mourning a marriage, a life, an identity. But now, I was uncovering the truth. Piece by piece, lie by lie. I was becoming someone new. People started reaching out. Women mostly. Through the blog I'd started, anonymous at first. I told my story raw and unfiltered. And the messages came in. One had been his girlfriend before me. Another had been a client. A third had nearly gone into business with him. He hadn't just disappeared. He had left a trail. And I was following it. What started as a desperate attempt to understand why turned into a slow-burning obsession. Every night, after the house was dark and quiet, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by manila folders, highlighted spreadsheets, and notes scrawled in the margins of my old appointment books. I wasn't just trying to piece together Trevor's betrayal anymore, I was studying him like a criminal profiler. Because that's what he was. I didn't realize it at first. I had spent so many years defending him, excusing the little lies, the inconsistencies, the way he avoided uncomfortable conversations. I told myself he was just stressed or that I was being paranoid. But now, with everything laid bare, it was clear. Trevor had been running a long con. And I had been one of many stops along the way. Eloise kept digging. She found more than either of us expected: companies with names like Tranquil Path and Lucid Balance Holdings. They weren't just shells. They had websites, logos, even fabricated testimonials. He'd set up an entire ecosystem of fake businesses designed to funnel and disguise money. And he wasn't alone. There were names, business partners, silent investors. A trail of complicity that stretched across continents. I went to the DA with everything. The case wasn't simple: too many jurisdictions, too much offshore activity, but they opened an investigation. It was a start. But what gnawed at me, even more than the financial ruin or the public humiliation, was the realization that I had loved a man who never really existed. Some nights, I sat in the bathtub until the water went cold, replaying old conversations in my head, dissecting every word for clues. I remembered our first trip to Charleston, how he held my hand as we watched the boats. The way he'd whisper in the dark, "You're everything to me." And I wondered, did he believe it, even for a second? Or was I always just a mark? Those questions don't have easy answers. Maybe they never will. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Colette. French-Canadian, in her 60s, with a raspy voice and the patience of a saint. At first, I hated every minute of it. I didn't want to explore my grief or make space for healing. I wanted justice. I wanted revenge. But slowly, session by session, she helped me put language to the things I couldn't admit to myself. "I feel stupid," I told her once. Like I let it happen. "You trusted," she said. "That's not stupidity. That's humanity." It took time, but I started believing her. I began walking again. Just around the neighborhood at first, then along the trails near the river. I bought groceries I actually cooked. I pulled the weeds from the garden Trevor never cared about. Small victories. But they mattered. One day, I got a call from a woman named Marilla. Her voice trembled when she introduced herself, but she got bolder as she spoke. "I saw your post online," she said. "The story about Trevor. I think he used a different name when I met him. But it's the same man." She told me everything. How they'd met at a retreat in Italy, how he'd charmed her, convinced her to invest in a luxury wellness startup. She'd put in $50,000. He vanished a week later. There were others. By summer, I had a list. 9 women. For men. Different countries, different aliases, same patterns. Some wanted to forget. Others wanted blood. I created a group chat. We called ourselves the Ashes Club. It sounds corny now, but in those early days, it was a lifeline. A place where we could scream into the void together. Share documents. Compare notes. Support each other when the legal process dragged and the press got it wrong. Because of course the press got involved. Local at first, then regional. A journalist from the Charlotte Observer called me after reading a summary of the court filings. Her name was Talia, sharp and relentless. She dug up more than I could. Flight records. Property transactions. A boat registered in Belize. Trevor had covered his tracks well, but not perfectly. The deeper we went, the clearer it became. He hadn't planned to stop. He'd just moved on to the next mark. I saw photos of him in Marrakesh, sipping something golden on the rooftop of a riad, a new woman at his side. And still, he looked untouchable. But I wasn't finished. I didn't want him dead. I wanted him exposed. There's something about public reckoning that hits harder than any prison sentence. I wanted people to see the man behind the mask. The liar. The manipulator. The architect of ruin who operated in charm and silk suits. Talia, the journalist, became a quiet force. She pieced together a full exposé with painstaking care. It ran under the title, The Disappearance Artist, Inside the Life of a Global Grifter. 10 pages of facts, timelines, testimonies. My story. Morella's. The women. The men. A financial map of the schemes, the shell companies, the retreats that never existed. Screenshots of emails. Photos. Audio clips. It hit like a bomb. Within 48 hours, the piece was shared thousands of times. Radio stations picked it up. News anchors shook their heads in disbelief. One morning, I sat on the edge of my bed watching a pundit call Trevor a ghost in Gucci. I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in months. But the real beauty came in the aftermath. Clients backed out of whatever was left of his ventures. His name was added to international watch lists. Legal inquiries poured in from 5 different countries. The IRS reopened closed files. Even Eloise, calm and cool Eloise, raised an eyebrow when she got the call from Interpol asking for cooperation. His accounts were frozen. His assets, what hadn't been hidden, seized or held for investigation. That boat in Belize? Searched and impounded. The penthouse in Monte Carlo? Rented under an alias and flagged. He couldn't touch $1 without it lighting up someone's desk. Then came the lawsuits. Mine was only one of many, but mine hit first. Financial damages. Fraud. Emotional distress. The court granted a ruling in my favor that allowed my legal team to take possession of any accessible property tied to Trevor's name. And thanks to Eloise, we found just enough buried in a holding company in the Caymans to satisfy a portion of it. Not all. Not even half. But enough to prove that he was no longer untouchable. It was poetic in a way. Watching his empire of illusions crumble one subpoena at a time. The last time I saw Trevor was on a grainy video call in a legal deposition. He looked tired. Gaunt. No more tan, no linen suits. He wore a polo shirt and sat in what looked like a budget hotel room. He refused to make eye contact with the camera. Spoke in clipped answers. Denied. Dodged. But the damage was already done. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just listened. After that, I stopped checking the alerts. I left the Ashes Club chat running but muted the notifications. The others were still fighting, still chasing justice. Some had found pieces of it. Others were just beginning. I'd done what I set out to do. I got my house back. I painted the kitchen, bought a new bed. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I went back to work in the fall. The kids hadn't changed much, still awkward, still messy, still full of fire. They didn't ask about the summer, and I didn't tell them. But when one of them came to me, weeks later, and said, "Ms. Harrington, how do you know if someone's lying to you?" I paused. Then I said, "You listen to what they don't say." I spent Thanksgiving in Asheville that year, just me and a few close friends. No drama. No noise. Just warmth, laughter, and sweet potato pie. And across the ocean, somewhere in a quiet room with locked accounts, frozen assets, and a long list of international lawyers, Trevor sat with no one to con. I never needed him to hurt. I just needed him to know that I saw him. Really saw him.